somewhere in your home right now. There is almost certainly a product made by a single Swiss company, and there is a good chance you have no idea. It might be the instant coffee in the cupboard, the bottled water in the fridge, the chocolate bar by the till, the food in the cat's bowl, or the formula that once fed a baby in your family. All of it can trace back to one firm, headquartered in a quiet town on a Swiss lake. It is called Nestlé, and it is the largest food company the world has ever built. This is a series about the companies that run the world and the rivals they left behind. Today it is Nestlé, and it represents something the earlier stories in this series only circled around: the unglamorous business of food. Not the growing of it, but the turning of raw commodities, milk and beans and cocoa and water, into the branded, shelf-stable products that fill the aisles of almost every shop on earth. It is one of the oldest and most quietly total forms of power there is. The story begins, fittingly, with a baby. In the 1860s, a pharmacist named Henry Nestlé created a milk-based cereal to feed infants who could not be breastfed at a time when many such babies simply did not survive. The product worked, and the company was born from a real and desperate need. From that first success grew a way of doing business that has held, almost unchanged, for more than a century and a half. The recipe was simple, and it was ruthless in its patience. Take something basic that people need to eat or drink. Make it safe, consistent, and long-lasting, so it can sit on a shelf for months. Put a trusted name on it, and then sell it, quietly and relentlessly, in every market you can reach, until the brand becomes part of the furniture of ordinary life. From that single idea grew something almost difficult to picture. Today, Nestlé sells thousands of different products under a couple of thousand brands in virtually every country that exists. Coffee, water, confectionery, frozen meals, ice cream, pet food, infant nutrition, sauces, cereals. It is not a company known for one great product, the way a chip maker or a car maker might be. It is a company that has quietly placed itself at almost every point on the human plate at once. The scale of that is best felt through a single number. In a typical year, Nestle takes in revenue on the order of $100 billion, making it, by sales, one of the largest food companies on the planet by a wide margin. People around the world drink billions of its coffees every single day. It is less a single business than a vast federation of everyday habits, each one small, all of them together enormous. Some of those habits are not even human. One of Nestlé's largest and most profitable divisions of all sells food not to people but to their pets, under names like Purina. It is a reminder of how the company works. It rarely dominates by being the loudest brand in the room. It wins by being present in dozens of quiet categories at once, several of which most customers never realize are the same company. It is not, of course, alone up there. The world of packaged food is really an oligopoly, a small cluster of giants who between them own an astonishing share of what humanity eats and drinks. Unilever, PepsiCo, Mondelez, Danone, Mars, Kraft Heinz. These are the rivals Nestle shares the shelf with, trading blows across coffee and snacks and water and frozen food. But Nestle sits at the head of that table, the broadest and, for most of its history, the largest of them all. The natural question is, why a clever new food brand with a genuinely better product can so rarely dislodge one of these giants? The answer is a moat that has almost nothing to do with taste. It is distribution and familiarity. Nestlé's real asset is that its products are already on every shelf, in every market, backed by decades of trust and a supply chain that buys raw ingredients at a scale no newcomer can match. To beat it, you do not just need a better bar of chocolate. You need to be everywhere, all at once. Nowhere is that clearer than in coffee, which is arguably the jewel of the whole empire. In the 1930s, Nestlé helped invent instant coffee at scale with Nescafé, turning a fragile crop into a powder that could sit in a jar for years and cross any border. Decades later, with Nespresso, it did the trick again at the luxury end, turning a simple cup into a premium ritual sold by the capsule. Rivals like JDE Peet's and Starbucks fight hard in this space, but coffee remains one of the great engines quietly powering the entire company. And then there is water, where the story turns distinctly uncomfortable. Nestlé built one of the largest bottled water businesses on earth, from sparkling names to plain purified water sold across much of the developing world. It took one of the few things every human being needs, something that in most places falls from the sky and runs from a tap, and turned it into a branded product shipped and sold by the bottle at a very healthy profit. That business has drawn some of the fiercest criticism the company has ever faced over the pumping of groundwater in stressed regions and over a question that sits at the very heart of what a food giant is. Is drinking water a basic human right to be guaranteed to all, or is it, like anything else, a product to be packaged, priced, and sold? Few arguments cut closer to the bone of this entire industry. The deepest scar, though, is older, and it concerns those babies again. In the 1970s, Nestle faced a worldwide boycott over the way infant formula was marketed in poorer countries, where critics argued that promoting formula over breastfeeding in places without clean water to mix it safely was doing real harm. The company has changed its practices a great deal since, and defenders note that formula genuinely saves lives where breastfeeding is not possible. But the episode remains a permanent reminder of the stakes when a giant sells to the most vulnerable. There is a strange twist that appears when you ask the question this series always asks of what actually breaks if a company like this were to vanish overnight. Here, unlike with a chip maker or a payment network, the honest answer is surprisingly little at first. Food is fungible. Someone else would make the chocolate and roast the beans. The shelves would refill within weeks. Nestlé's power is simply not the irreplaceable single point of failure kind that a lone lithography maker holds. Its power is something softer, and in its own way, just as deep. What it really controls is not a technology, but a habit, repeated billions of times a day, across generations. The coffee your parents drank, that you now drink, that your children will one day reach for without a second thought. That grip is not built on a patent that can expire. It is built on trust and familiarity, so old it has become invisible, and that may be the most durable moat of all, precisely because you never feel it holding you. Which leads to the uncomfortable question, in perhaps its most intimate form yet. How much of what the human race actually eats and drinks each day now flows through the hands of just a few enormous firms? We worry, rightly, about concentration in chips and finance and energy. We think far less about the concentration of the plate itself, the quiet reality that the daily diet of billions is shaped by decisions made in a small number of distant corporate headquarters. Nestlé is among the very largest. To be fair, and it deserves saying plainly, there is genuine good buried in this story too. Reliably feeding much of the planet with food that is safe, consistent, and does not spoil is a real achievement, one that earlier generations would have found almost miraculous. Nestlé fortifies foods with missing nutrients, funds serious nutritional science, and delivers dependable calories to places that once struggled to get them. The very ordinariness of it, the way a jar of coffee simply works, hides an enormous and largely unglamorous accomplishment. And that is the deeper lesson, in perhaps its most everyday form. Beneath all the noise about the companies that make our machines and move our money, there is a layer more basic than any of them. The actual food and drink that keeps the human race alive from one day to the next. Nestlé is the quiet giant sitting astride that layer, a company whose name you might rarely say aloud, yet whose products are at this very moment almost certainly somewhere in your home.